Okay, so hi there, my name's John Watkins. I'm from the University of Birmingham, and I work very closely with MapleSoft to try and, I guess in this particular project, work out how we should improve the product in various ways. So I think I'll just move through. This is the second version of a syntax checker we've made. We've showed MapleSoft the first version. I think they've briefly seen this one. And really it came about for us from an idea of trying to get Maple to be adopted more widely across the university. Okay, so just a very brief timeline of things. So we've been in the game of computer algebra for a while, and many of you may know that Stack was developed at Birmingham. So there's a lot of research gone into how we should do these sort of things. We've stopped using Stack around 2012 and started using Maple TA. I think, yeah, that's right, I started using Maple TA, so we've been using it for a few years now. Just a quick photo of the people involved. So, happy Tom up there, who tells me he was drunk when he took that photo. So, my friend Rich, who looks like a serial killer. There's me there, and then Nicola, who you may know. And then here we have Jordan and Rob, who are PhD students at the university who do a lot of the coding for us and things. Rob is Nicola's PhD student. They're all part of the Maple TA Interns program, which is a program we run every summer at the university, to write content for people across the university. So most lecturers at the University of Birmingham don't write their own content. They're written similar to the University of Waterloo, I think. Well, we have a project similar to them at least, which is a big bank of interns write content over the summer for lecturers, working with lecturers. So lecturers really don't know how to use the system very well. They have an expectation that it's going to be somehow as easy as paper, things like this, which maybe is unreasonable, but they're unable to necessarily help the students with syntax when syntax problems come up. And so yeah, so this is the sort of impetus for us doing this syntax checker project. Okay, there's supposed to be a demo here, as you can see. So most of my talk is really a demo of a syntax checker, which I'm going to show you now. Right, so I don't remember any of my passwords anymore. Okay, so right. Okay, so we have a question type we've designed with this new syntax checker in. We can add the syntax checker to any question at the University of Birmingham, so I'll very quickly show you that process. So what we have done at the university is modified the interface slightly using JavaScript, and we do that because it's quick for us to do. We can improve functionality in certain areas of TA. We can do quite a lot of things by doing that. And if you can see at the side here, you have this checkbox for how to add the syntax checker or not. So if you click that checkbox, then there's a new thing that runs when the students look at the question, and it's looking at what the students are doing and working out if they're typing things correctly. So there's nothing more the lecturer has to do than just check that box, and they get the syntax checker. So it's appropriate for Maple questions, Maple graded questions, anything where you're using Maple syntax, which is where our focus is. So I don't know if many of you, actually I'll show you one more thing. I don't know if many of you realise, but when you write a question in Maple TA, you have a couple of choices of different, so we have the mathematical formula input box. Now the mathematical formula input box does its best to try and make a friendly syntax, but it doesn't work in all cases. And one of the problems here is, because it doesn't work in all cases, if you teach your students this friendly syntax, then you ask them to enter a more complicated syntax, they fail. And what it means is you have to keep giving the students training, giving them specific help in the questions all the time, hand out sheets. There's lots of support around this. So for us, the mathematical formula type didn't work early on, so we were forced to use Maple syntax to at least give a consistent syntax that students had half a chance of learning. So we then use Maple syntax for all our things. So we go Maple graded and choose the Maple syntax option. Okay, so that's what we're doing. So let me go back to the question content repository. Okay, so this is a question much like I've described, where you check the box with the syntax checker on. And this is the sort of thing you get. There's no question here, there's just playing with the syntax checker, that's all we're going to do. Okay, so the sort of things that come up, and I want some feedback about this from you all, really, to see what you think. So my struggle is always with the student has some mathematics in their head, they could write it on a piece of paper, you would grade it correctly if you were grading it on paper, but the system needs to understand it. And if the students put some effort into working out some math and they don't get the right answer for a silly reason like this, it seems unfair. Now, there's a different view around the world for how people view this. And my experience in the UK, people don't want to think about syntax at all. And in Europe, it seems to me that people are more happy to say the students have to learn syntax. Now, I don't know which way it's going to go in the end. We don't know. But at the moment in the UK, we definitely, in my university and many I've dealt with, we don't want to think about syntax. So in Denmark, this is not a problem, because everyone knows Maple, so there's no issue. But in the UK, it's not. It is a problem. So, for example, if you type in something like, I don't know, x sine, let's say 2x, exactly like that in Maple, in that box, that will be graded incorrectly. Now, all of you can read that, but the Maple can't. So that's a problem. So what I'm missing from here, does anybody know what I'm missing? Yeah, loads of stars, yeah? So there's loads of stars missing, okay? So there's lots of common mistakes like this that the students will make. Another good one would be x to the power minus 2. See this a lot as well? Maple doesn't understand that. Big problem. The missing trick here is brackets. Okay, so we get all these sorts of things which cause problems with the computer, which the system can't understand. Now, these are errors. The system can't read these things, they cause an error, but you get other classes of problems. You might get a student who's been using, I'm going to say a bad word, Mathematica all day, okay? And if you're using Mathematica all day, you'll type in this for sine. That's sine x in Mathematica. Now, Maple can read this, it doesn't necessarily think it's that. Okay, it seems like something else. You might even go, okay, my brackets are wrong, so I'm fine. So what I'll do is capital S, sine, round brackets S. I've got the brackets right. Again, Maple can't read that. So these are very common mistakes. There are lots of them like this, and we can really help our students deal with this. So this is kind of the idea. So there's two classes of problems. One are things that are syntactically correct, the things that the computer can't read. And there's other things which the computer, okay, there's three classes, sorry. There's things the computer can't read, like this one was. There's things the computer can read but misinterprets, and there's things that the computer can't read at all. And you've got to deal with all those cases. Okay, so what happens now is if I go into this box and try and start typing here, so let me put in something that's correct. If I put in sine x like that, it's absolutely happy to deal with that. You all see that, by the way. Let me make it a little bit bigger. So the computer's completely happy with that, and that's fine. We see the little check mark at the end. If I forget a bracket, I get this little warning up, and it tells me I've forgotten a bracket. So this expression is easy, but if you're a really long expression, brackets can be really easy to miss. So we get this little warning up, and it says what the student's done wrong. You've got a mismatched number of brackets. The student go back and find that and fix that. So something like that. Okay? The other thing you might get is something like typing the sine x example in. So you put in that, and straight away the computer's telling me now, syntax warning, sine is not a function, you should write it in lowercase. So it's quite easy for us to know what you should be doing. There's common cases we can catch and we're telling you. I don't think we're giving any of the game away, we're not helping them with maths, we're just giving them warnings. So let's do that. And that's fine. Okay, so it's still moaning at me, I've sort of fixed it, but I've ignored that warning. And it's telling me sine, this is not a trigonometric function, so it's giving me some warning. So it goes back and it's fine. Okay, so let's try a few more. Anybody else want you to shout out to me? Do you want to shout one out?
Start the same one, x sine 2x.
X sine 2x, okay, yeah. Okay, I'll do that one, sorry. So, yeah, so this one's moaning at me because I've forgotten brackets, so which fixes that problem. And all these sort of classes of problems are dealt with. So, there's lots of things like log x. It does. Now, log x is a fun one. So, I'll show you another example of this. So, like, let me think of one. So, let's take x let's say xx. So let's say I had an answer, I wanted to put x times x in as the answer, or maybe x times y is a better example. So the other level we have is this thing we're working on now. This is a work in progress because we have to work on the language of this. But so Maple can read this. It thinks it's a variable called xy. Okay, so it's correct, syntactically correct. It can read it, but it's not what the student meant to put. So one of the things I wanted to talk to you all today about is what language we should use here to communicate with the students. So is variable a word that everybody in this room is happy with? That's my one question. And are your students happy with this? And how low does that go? Is this university or at school level? What do people understand by variable? Does it feel like the right word to use in a math context, in a programming context? Has anybody got any comments about this?
It's an X.
Say?
A variable is an X.
A variable is an X.
Yeah.
Always an X.
Always.
That's a good comment, yeah. Anybody else have any opinions from maybe the school level? Phil?
I think you hit on something, which is that the answer may vary.
Yep.
No pun intended.
Yeah.
From audience to audience.
Yeah, yeah.
You need the term variable if you do programming,
Yep.
if you do calculus. If you've just done some algebra, you'd probably call it an unknown.
Yes, you might do.
That's
Yeah,
just in that's just in English. And
Yep.
it's just in British.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So that's a tricky one.
It is, yeah.
I think somehow one needs to get across there that it's being treated as a single thing.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
And two things multiplied
Yeah.
together.
So what you say then is, this is not x times y.
Exactly.
So I think that's exactly how we think about it. You tell them the other thing they think it could have been, and then you say it's not this, by the way. Yeah, that's a good way of doing it. Yeah. So the other question I have today for you all as well is whether this is the way to go. Okay. So there's a couple of other ways you could go here. Okay. So we know the cases that people are getting wrong. We know the sort of quickly.
Yeah, sorry. Speaking from a student standpoint, since
Yep.
I am a student.
Excellent. Thank you.
So it's really.
Speaking for all students.
Yeah. Variable is something, if you've done any math, it makes sense, but thinking of high school level or some such, I'll think maybe it's better to just use name, because everyone knows that a name is something concrete, and if I say the name XY is sected, then it's XY, and not
Oh, I see. Yeah.
X, the name X sected and the name Y sected.
Yeah, so separate them and say it's
Yeah.
one thing. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's in daily use, that will always get across, I think at least.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
I agree that if you have in calculus or any algebra, you should know what a variable is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But see, the thing is, the hope for these systems is they get adopted from across the whole university for every course, and then going down to schools. So if you want to deal with this, you might have to make language appropriate for a class, so let a teacher choose how those things look, or you might have to find something that's generic for everywhere, and it's not obvious what the answer is.
My students in high school, they know what a variable is.
Yeah.
So
To do Python things and programming.
we just use the name variable
Okay.
for things you put in a function.
Yeah, yeah.
So they would not, if you say the name is XY, then they wouldn't understand that.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so I think that we are talking about that you choose the name for the class,
Yeah.
then it's a good.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you could. It's not. My hope is that the other way you could look at it is if you had some sort of graphical representation of a simple tree or something like that, you could allow them to hover over the bits and see that these things were connected as objects. That might also do it. There's other things potentially like that.
Just curious on how far you may have gone with like something such as like log base x or
Yeah.
non-base.
Yeah. So if you do one of the interesting quirks we have at the moment is it log 10?
It tends to really just like when you student writes like log base x of y or something like that, it interprets that very badly.
Oh yeah, so I don't know if we have to solve that actually yet. So yeah, so we can do things like this, so it'll pick up those sort of things.
That's great.
But then the other word we use then, so this one's telling you logarithm, and you have things like maybe sine where we're using the word function. Now is function another word that's going to be confusing to people? Or is function okay again? It's just these words, isn't it? So like if you go to really heavy math, it talks about atomic variables and stuff like that, and you're like, this is too much, you know? So how do you get this across?
There's another thing
thinking about this variable. Suppose you have the sign of p times x. Then is that a function of two variables, or this be a parameter?
Yeah.
So that's another possible meaning of a name.
Yes, exactly. Because exactly. So the more mathematical description you get, is less maybe helpful colloquially. I get exactly. So yeah, exactly. I thought.
Suppose I'm setting a question on functions, and the answer involves function names
Yep.
that aren't built in
Absolutely. Yeah.
to Maple, but I don't want it to warn.
Like my function is called funct, for example, yeah, whatever, yeah. Or I've got something like, so yes, you should have, I think exceptions is really important to this.
So it only warns if it looks a bit like a trig function, but isn't.
Yeah, so it's basically doing pattern matching on common things at the moment, but if, for Phil's example is, if you have, let's say you have a differential equation with some, I don't know, some function that's called fy, let's say, and it's actually a genuine part of the program. Is that your question? And you don't want to warn them that's wrong or anything, that is valid. Yeah. In this case, yeah. And yeah, so you always, so what we've taken the view is there is a general set of things people do, and then to allow exceptions, like you've described, which is how it should be. So the other thing I was going to say is a different way you could approach this. So
John, could you try a
some
simple
other way to do this is when you, one of the powers of Maple TA is the ability to enter anything you want. And that is a blessing and a curse because people can enter nonsense and all sorts of things. The other way you could do it is by when people only allow people to enter things that are correct or understandable. So, for example, missing brackets, should they ever be allowed to type an expression without two brackets in? If you delete the brackets, you should always go away. It's a more template-based thing. So it might be possible to create an editor that is like that. Now I've seen this in other systems and I haven't seen an implementation I really like, so the flexibility of Maple seems to be preferred for me, but that's another way to go. So more of a palette you can choose from, but only allow people to put those things in. So it's not breakable, more restricted. My worry is it's more restricted. So you kind of have to face this problem is the point. What do people think about that? Do people think you need the openness of this editor? The open syntax, all the options you can do, ability to write nonsense. Is that what people want? Yeah, people like to write nonsense, I'm getting. yeah, I think that's true because the blank piece of paper is a much better model for trying to test your student, I think, yeah? So if we can help them communicate better, that seems a much better way to me. Now the final way to do this, and I want to get some quick feedback on this, is, well, if we know what the students mean in most cases, why don't we just put it into grading code? Why don't we just say, well, if you put the capital sign, we're going to convert that to sign. If we put all these things, all these different cases, do people want that? Or do people want, my view is, you get the student to communicate with the system, and then you have some grading code which you can understand, which is really simple at the back end. I don't want to mix these two things up. So I want the student to be left with an expression which is correct syntax at the end of the day.
What I currently do is I build in forgivingness on things like lowercase pi or using e to mean e to the power of 1, which I don't think is even an error. But,
no, I think, so we've done that too. In our grading code, e to the x is correct for us because it's so common. But maybe forgivingness on some things is correct, and then warnings on the rest is probably the model.
Yes,
yeah.
It's probably gets quite fractally complicated when you get to
yeah, I think so, yeah.
I think some of the time you do want to say, this is such a common error, it isn't even an error.
Yeah, I agree. Do we have a sort of consensus on that, the view? Because we're going to keep pushing forwards with this, I guess. So if I put in, so who's unhappy with this? The student puts in capital sign, and I know that's sign, so I'm going to convert it to little sign. Who's happy with that? Who's horrified by that? It's always great. So nobody, okay? Okay, so some people are horrified. It's the problem, isn't it? Okay, so what about stars? If I put in 2 sign x, who's horrified by that? It's going to be the same 3 people again, isn't it?
I think if there's only one interpretation, it should put time sign.
Yeah, I think that is easy to always interpret as that. And I think that is too. So I don't know. We'll probably just give you options, because who knows? Everyone has their own mind, but no, it's good feedback, thank you. By the way, just for reference, it also works on this mode, so if you put sign x in here, So even though this editor is, it formats what you get, it doesn't always, you don't always type the right thing in. So it's telling me now that sign is not correct, there's something wrong with it, and it's telling me it's not a function again. So this is a lovely editor, what you see is what you get, it formats it for you, but you can still type in garbage into this. So, what did you say? Yeah, I think the editor's a great option. I don't want to lose this flexibility, but something around this to help would be nice. Because at the end of the day, if you can ensure the student communicates well with the system, you don't need to check the grade book anymore. Yeah. So this is what we have to do at Birmingham a lot, because if a student puts that in and I'm not wrong, it's not a great experience for them. Because it's very, very jarring. It's very different to the human, and it really just sets off on a bad footing.
Could it also be possible that when you're doing numbers grades, as they had to put in number, then in Denmark we use comma
points, yeah.
So it could be a warning that you have to use.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Everybody uses language math locally differently, so I think that's right, yeah, absolutely.
John, I'm just curious how, one common problem we've run into is if you've got, say, polynomial factor form with a root of multiplicity 2 or higher, and then beside it you have another root and a student. In the equation editor, they clearly write x plus 2 to the power 3, and then beside that they write x plus 1.
Yeah, so x plus 2, yeah, okay, that's fine. To the power, x plus 2, sorry, you're x plus 2, sorry.
Yeah, there we go, yeah. X plus 2
to the power 3.
And then beside that, or 2 or whatever, and then beside that they write open bracket x plus 1.
Yeah.
It's,
yeah, so we're going to get this
oh, that's very nice. Yeah.
Because it looks right, doesn't it? Yeah.
It looks very right. Yeah. I mean, it is right on paper. That's exactly how you would write it.
Yeah.
And it marks it wrong every time.
Yeah, and you know, the first reaction people have to these systems is a really big one, yeah? And so you put it in front of a class or a bunch of, you know, you might get so we get a lot of, when we first did a demo of Maple Tea at the university, interested parties from various high levels of the university come in who find a bit of time to look at this new thing. Yeah. And if that's the first thing they see is they're getting things wrong for silly reasons, they just dismiss it. And there's no need for it, okay?
There's another kind of related thing, I'm not sure it's directly relevant to what you're doing here, but it's always struck me that, you know, in British mathematical notation, we're less likely to use a central point to represent multiplication.
Yes, we are, yeah, exactly.
We don't put anything or we put a times sign.
Yeah.
So some of, I think we saw a little bit of this when we were doing the thing we're going to be reporting on later. So these were fairly novice students, last 2 years of high school kind of age, and they saw something like that, and what's that decimal point doing there?
Yeah, that's
right. If that could be localized.
Yeah.
Could be made
yeah, absolutely. Maths is a language that's local. You know, it just is, and I think we have to accept that.
It is local, but also I think the level of syntax check you get maybe varies on the ability range.
Yeah. I think that's right.
Yeah. So I think for me, like some of these times, there's range, but the students I'm working with, if it's a capital S or a little s, doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, exactly.
As long as it knows it's right, it knows it's right.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Some of these points. The big one is the time sign.
Yeah, so for you, it's a case of going more like Phil saying, we write kind of things in the back end so they don't have to see it. Yeah.